Tuesday. Winter's coming, right? But, it's only a few weeks until when? Christmas. But between now and Christmas, there are some things you have to do, right? Get through the rest of the semester. So, yeah. So, that being said, we, as faculty and as I think as students, we're both excited that the end of term is coming, but also frightened all of the work we've got to do. So you can tell from the arc of the way we've structured the courses for this class that we're really coming towards the end here, focusing on issues around self-care and how to take care of yourself in a context that's where lots of demands are being made on your time. So in that regard, I'm delighted that Dr. Carol Anderson is with us today. If you can, take one of her classes, please do. I've appreciated her commitment to Bremen. She lives two lives at once. I've been trying to do that all my life, and I've not succeeded, but she succeeded. She's a practicing psychologist with a practice out in BC, and yet she's here at the same time. She has perhaps the longest commute of any faculty member between her home in British Columbia and Berkeley. So it is really illustrative of the commitment that faculty here at Berlin have for your success. That we have faculty willing to commute great distances because they believe so strongly in you. And that's one of the reasons that Dr. Anderson is here. She's got another career that could keep her fully occupied, but yet she's chosen to spend some of her time here at Berman, fulfilling an important need in helping you find success. So, again, please pay close attention to what Dr. Anderson's going to be saying. Again, it's very valuable information. Remember the bargain that we have together, please, no walking out. Last class, some still walked out during the presentation. I told Dr. Anderson that I promised you a break at about 10:02. So I hope you'll honor that, and I'm very grateful, Dr. Anderson, that you were here today. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm super excited to be here as well. And as Dr. McDowell said, I am a psychologist and practicing psychologist. And I've worked with adults and university-age people for many years. And I have learned so much from people like you. And so I decided at some point in my career that I really wanted to give back and pass on the knowledge that people had taught me, my clients had taught me, and thus I'm here at Berman. And of course, I really appreciated a faith-based institution, and so Berman fits the bill. So yes, I do very well. I'm happy to be here, but I'm feeling super sorry for you guys here at 4:20 in the afternoon after you've been doing whatever you've been doing all day. So I hope that we can stay awake and stay engaged to make it through the last push of the day until you get to supper time. So I haven't given this lecture in particular before, so I'm not sure how long it will take. We'll for sure end on time and maybe even have a few minutes for we'll see how that goes. So the topic that we're going to be talking about today is setting boundaries and how to have a balanced life. And that is no easy task. How many of you, when you get something that needs to be assembled, go right to the directions and look at the directions to see what you have to do? So how many are like, let's go to the directions kind of people? Okay, how many of you are like, skip the directions, let's just dive in? Okay, so we look like we might have like, 50-50, I don't know. If we really want to know exactly what something is all about, you actually do have to go to the directions. I went to my card before I came here. It was a VW Jetta function so that we can function at our best. And so I thought I would take us right to the beginning for our little kind of spiritual worship thought that we're going to integrate into this. If you are a person of faith, you'll know the biblical story, very familiar to you, about creation, where in the beginning God created, right? So this part's not new. God separated light from darkness on the first day. That was an evening and a morning. He says, that's very good. And then he separated the waters from the waters below. So something in the sky and the waters below. He says, that's very good, and that's an evening and a morning. And then he goes on to create the sea and the land and divide that. And that's an evening and morning. And then he puts things up in the sky and separates that from the earth below. Of course, he creates birds and fish and animals and ultimately people. And then at the very end, he goes, woo, this is really great. This is really good. We should all celebrate. And he creates the Sabbath, which is a day of rest. That would be kind of like the creator's manual for what was and how God put everything into order. So I just showed you all those days of the week, but I'm going to ask you the question, what was created? But I'm not looking for animals and moon and star. I'm looking for what else was created. So I want you to think what else was created other than animals and sun, moon, stars, and people. And I'd like you to just go in groups of 2 or 3, so just somebody who's next to you. And I want you to use your creative brain and think, what was also created at that time? And I'm going to give you 3 or 4 minutes. So if you're sitting, so just somebody very close to you. Make sure you get somebody with you. Somebody to come around and ask. What else was created?
And my thing is, like, I really think it was, Okay, so what do we have here? I've divided mine whether I start at the back or the front. But we had a very studious little group here, right here. We're going to start with you guys. You get the first kick in the can. What do you think was created? misspelled. Don't put that consciousness down. I know it's misspelled. Anybody else over here? Yes.
Balance.
Balance. Okay. Anybody else over here on this side? Yes.
Structure and foundation and structure. Because
Foundation and
you
structure.
need water for the plants, you need water for animals, you need light for everything to live.
Okay. Anybody else? I think that's on the other hand. Yes.
Boundaries.
Boundaries. Anybody else on this side? Yes.
Hierarchy and laws.
Hierarchy and
Laws.
and laws. Yes. Okay. What about this side?
Morals.
Morals. Sin. Maybe not yet. And created. Yes. But yes, you're right. It came. Yes.
Reality.
Reality was created. Anybody else? Logic. Have we missed anything? Any other great ones that you guys came up with? Potential. A lot of stuff was created and put into place at that time. And if we wanted to continue, we could just continue probably generating all the things that were created in this structure. There was a gentleman by the name of Johannes Hartl. He is some kind of religious philosopher. And he said that pretty much everything could be considered in what he considered 5 things that were created at creation. Order and structure. And you'll notice that you actually got some of these things. And he also said connectedness and relationships. So love we came up with. And there's relationships between all the different pieces in creation. Also was created with beauty. The world was beautiful. After everything, God said it's very good. And then last, some meaning and purpose for existence. So in his thought, everything sort of got connected in those 5 things. We're just going to leave that a little bit, or we can just look at how the order and structure of days and above and below, separating things, lots of structure that was created there, things ordered and lined up. Beauty, when you think about the birds and the fish and the plants over here, beauty was created. He made people and relationships between all of those. And purpose and meaning when we think about celebrating God and being connected to God. Just put that on hold a little bit. What is meant by a boundary? What is a boundary? That's really our topic today. What is a boundary? Something that divides. Okay? Any other definitions? Something that divides.
Something that protects.
There's a hand over here.
Oh, I was going to say it gives space also. So the boundary is able to give
Right,
space.
so it not only divides, but it gives space. And somebody else said something over here.
Something that protects.
Protects. Something that people should respect. Yes, a measure put in place for safeguarding something. So if you just go to, oh, sorry, we have another one.
Boundaries define regions.
Define regions, yes. I went to the dictionary and it said a line that marks the limits of an area, a dividing line. And they give some examples here with the second definition, the eastern boundary of the wilderness. Or it could be a limit of a subject or a sphere of activity. So it could even be more abstract, like a political boundary. We were just trying to describe all of those things. And you can think as we look at creation, the number of boundaries that were created. Time boundaries, boundaries between different kinds of structures, above and below. There was lots and lots of boundaries that were created in the creation process. And if we were to think of boundaries, we can have boundaries that are very, very rigid. This wall is a rigid boundary. If it was made out of concrete, it would be even more rigid. Air is a somewhat porous boundary, right? We can move through air. We know that it's there, but we can't see it. We could say that my sweater is a somewhat flexible boundary, right? I can stretch it, I can move it, etc. If we were to think about the boundary of time, we can see that time, a day like morning and evening and nighttime and daytime, is clear, but it's flexible. We don't know exactly when the sun goes down, right? You have that kind of in-between time where it doesn't get light and dark just like that. We call it twilight. That it's very clear, but there's some in-between times there. So boundaries can be rigid, they can be really porous and chaotic and unclear, or they can be really clear and flexible. We're going to come back to that idea in a few minutes. If you think about cells, how many of you are hoping to study biology or are studying biology? Okay, so we get right down to cells, which have lots of boundaries. Now, if cells had very, very rigid boundaries, nothing would get in or out. If the boundaries of cells were chaotic and unclear, we would not have a very healthy cell. Too many things would get in, and the cell would implode, or it would be not healthy. But what's beautiful about a cell, and of course in creation cells were created, is that there are clear and flexible boundaries. And if you're studying biology, you'll begin to understand all the chemical and physical processes that allow things to get in and out of cells. So our body is made up of cells, and they have boundaries, and they allow things in and out. And when that process is working well, our body is healthy, we feel good, and we're alive, and we live. We can also have boundaries in relationships. And that is, where do you begin, and where do I begin, and what's our relationship to each other? If we had no relationship to each other, that would make for a pretty sucky life. In fact, life has a lot of purpose and meaning and beauty because we have relationships with the outside world. So boundaries help us figure out you and I and how we relate to each other, and how comfortable we are in how we relate and how we want to be treated in our relationships. Relationships and the boundaries that we have, turns out that it is one of the most important factors in longevity and satisfaction. In fact, some of the psychological literature, and if you, I hope you might be interested in psychology. Obviously, I'm fascinated with the study of psychology, and I hope we have maybe some psych majors here. Where are psych majors? Beautiful. Okay, so hopefully I'll be seeing you in some classes soon. What we understand from relationships is that if you have healthy relationships, you will live longer. In fact, you might even live longer than if you exercise well or eat all the right food. The relationships that you have and how you establish them and how you relate to each other is so important for your future health. What's beautiful about your age right now is in therapy, I'm always really happy when I get a young person, because you have your lives ahead of you, and any decision or change towards the good that you make now will impact your entire life, and you will have benefit from that. You have your life in front of you, so now is the time to really give a lot of these things some good thought. Boundaries are really about your relationship with yourself, and they're about helping you meet your needs and goals and feelings and values. For example, people. What do we mean by that? When, where, and how do you want to be touched? How many of you are huggers? You see somebody and you want to hug them. How many of you are like, don't hug me, I see you, I don't want to be touched? There's a few of you, right? I have to say that, boundaries can change. When I was your age, I was like, don't hug me. If I see you, I don't want to be hugged. But now that I'm older, I'm like, if I see somebody that I love or I haven't seen for a while, of course I want to hug them. And probably COVID and some of the distance that we had from people made me appreciate that much more. How frequently and how often and for what length of time do you want to see and visit with others versus spend time on your own? How many of you love a lot of time on your own? How many of you hate time in your life on your own? You want to be with your friends and hang out and be with people. Yeah, so each of you have different ideas about the boundaries that you want with people and your time. How much are you willing to share? Like, do your friends know your passcodes? Yeah. Ah, some of you say no way. Some of you are like, yeah. Okay. Would you let your friend drink from your glass? Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. Okay. Could your friends eat the food off your plate? If you were having a really rough day, would you share your innermost feelings with your friends? Okay, so again, all of you have really different ideas. How many people do you want to connect with on social media? Lots and lots and lots? Just a few. Okay, these are all the boundaries that we set up with other people, and we can already see that all of us have really different boundaries around all of this. And if I was looking at you, I would have no idea which of those you wanted or not. Do you want a hug? Can I drink from your glass? Can I have your password? Are you going to tell me how you feel? We don't always know people and their boundaries. So you might say, yeah, I'm cool with following each other on social media, but you may not know my passwords. Or I'm comfortable kissing and holding hands, but not in public. But maybe in 2 months I'll be willing to hold your hand in public. I'm okay with regular texting, but please don't text me. I'll text you multiple times in an hour. Or actually, if I don't hear from you for a few hours, I'm in a panic and I'm wondering, did I say something? What happened? What's going on? I want to spend time with my friends, or I'd rather spend time with my family on the weekends. I really need some quiet time to myself today. I am a hopeless introvert. That's true. But I happen to marry a hopeless extrovert. And I had the great misfortune of having extroverted children. So, actually, my son is actually more introverted. So I have had to adjust myself to be more extroverted. And I think my husband has had to adjust himself to be more introverted. I'm comfortable with some touching, but I'm not ready to have sex. That one can vary a lot. I work with a very secular population, and they don't necessarily have values that maybe a faith-based person would. Again, everybody, I think you've got faith or not. Some people are ready to have sex on the first date. Other people are, I'm not having sex with you until we're married. Other people are not having sex with you until we have a committed relationship. I would say, don't have sex with somebody that you don't want to have a baby with. Just say. Nothing is foolproof. So, okay, now I want you to think about boundaries, right? So I've tried to name a few to get your thinking. I want you to go back in your groups, and I want you to think about some boundaries. Either some boundaries, I don't know, we're going to come up with a list of boundaries just to get us thinking about all the potential boundaries. So go back into your groups, try and be creative. What are some boundaries that we haven't already talked about? Okay, time with people. And somebody else had their hand up.
Being able to say yes or no.
Yes or no? Anybody else over here? Sorry? Oh, your phone. Yes. Would you let somebody else look at your phone and go through your phone? Yes.
Personal space.
Space, your personal space. As you can see, some of these are going to also vary by culture. Different cultures determine sometimes how much space you can have. Some need more space between people, and some are more comfortable with closer space. Anybody here in the middle?
Secrets.
Secrets, right. How much information are you going to share? My father-in-law always says secrets are for telling.
Asking permission.
Asking
Permission before doing
permission,
something.
yes,
if you're
asking
like food,
permission.
asking first.
Anybody else here in the middle? Don't press. Post a photo. Oh, yes. All the rules around social media. You don't post photos or maybe even take a picture. Yes.
If they have any problems with me, then I would really want them to talk about it with other people. I just really want them to just come to me and talk about it. We can. Before they talk about it with other people.
Right. So how much does personal information about you get shared with other people, like your stories? Don't call. Right. Calling and time. When do you call? When do you not call? How late? Anybody else here in the middle?
Money and finance.
Money and finance is another one. How do you handle that? And do you buy other people dinner or not?
Time management was just respecting time.
Right, so how do you respect yours and other people's time? Okay, what about this side of the room? Nobody? Oh, come on. What have we not got on the board yet, or have we got them all off the board? Oh, truthfulness. Somebody says, do you like my outfit? And you think it's terrible. What do you say? Habits? Habits.
I think we should change.
Your faith.
Being respected as
Yeah, respect. Okay, as you can see, there's all kinds of boundaries. And they fall into all different kinds of areas. So here is where pretty much all of these should fit. And I think we pretty much got most of them. So physical boundaries, so your personal space and your physical touch and what that means to you and how you want to handle that. Your emotional boundaries, how much are you going to share? How much do you want other people to share about your innermost feelings? Your verbal and intellectual boundaries, your thoughts and ideas. Now, of course, I think probably somewhere in this class you've been learning about copyright laws, right, and plagiarism, right? That has something to do with a boundary, an intellectual boundary around thoughts and ideas and creativity. And how much are you going to share and speak, etc. Your sexual boundaries, all different kinds of aspects of your sexuality. Material boundaries, money, possessions. Do you want other people to use your things? Do you share clothes with each other? Do you allow somebody else to use your phone? Do you let somebody else use your car? Time boundaries. How do you use your time? And then, of course, spiritual and religious boundaries, your beliefs and your practices. I believe that it's right about now that is the break time. So it's a lot of times, such as trauma, abuse, neglect, sometimes it's difficult for you to even know where your boundaries are because somebody has violated those boundaries a lot in your life. But on the other hand, if you have lived your life in a lot of isolation, not around a lot of people, you're just learning and growing, you guys are young people, it is also possible that you don't really know your boundaries yet. So there could be a couple of situations where it might be difficult to know where your boundaries are. So here's a tip for boundaries. It can be really helpful to think about your boundaries ahead of social situations, because often when you're in a social situation, it can be really difficult to figure out how you want to handle that situation. I was working with somebody the other day, and they had a social engagement that they had a lot of anxiety about because somebody was going to be at this social engagement that they didn't really want to speak to. And so they decided, I'm going to go to the restaurant ahead of time, I'm going to get myself seated, I'm going to kind of claim my territory, and then that's going to help me relax. And in fact, the other person that they didn't want to see had the same idea, and they both arrived at the same time, and nobody else had arrived yet. And they were like, what do I do? And so we explored what are some things that you could do in the future if that happens to you again. So sometimes anticipating your boundaries ahead of time really helps. If you're on a date with somebody, you may want to think ahead of time about how you want to handle your boundaries. Will you accept a kiss at the end of the night? Will you allow somebody to hold your hand? Do you want it to be a short time, a long time? What do you want that to look like? Because different people might have very different ideas about what that should look like. Some people would be no touch at all until we have clarified where our relationship is, and other people might be more comfortable with that. So you can start by paying attention to how you feel about and react to situations around you, whether they're in real life or in shows or in movies you watch. And you can think about, what in life makes me feel uncomfortable? So you can just ask yourself that question. What in my life makes me feel uncomfortable? What's the most important thing to me? What's really important for me to keep private? Do I have any deal breakers? So I hear lots of people say, if I'm dating somebody and they cheat on me, that's it. That's a deal breaker for me. Somebody else might say, if somebody lies to me, that's it. That's a deal breaker. I'm done with that friendship. Do you have any deal breakers? Sorry? Yeah. Right, okay, if you feel that there's a lot of judgment toward you, that might be a deal breaker for the relationship for you. And it might be helpful to write down some of your thoughts around this. So I'm just going to ask you, so I'm going to set a boundary. So I've been asking you to do lots of sharing, but when we do something personal, we often want to keep that to ourselves. So I'm not going to ask you to share this, but what I'd like you to write down, do you have any deal breakers? So that you may choose to share that with your friends, but I'm not requiring that of you to share that in the group. I just want you to think about that. And you might even also just want to write down, is there something that really makes you feel uncomfortable or something that's super important to you in your life? Just write those down, and those might have something to do with the kinds of boundaries that you want to have. Let's just give you a second to do that. Some people like a lot of their personal information very private. Some people are very open. Often our feelings let us know where a boundary might be. Now we've talked about, how do you know your in your life, maybe not everybody, but the person that it's relevant to. Other people think, feel, and behave differently than you. And we noticed that when we were just talking about boundaries, how different you were. And other people actually think and behave different than you, and they cannot read your mind. And of course, different cultures have different boundaries. We all have different customs, we have different ways of doing things. I remember the first time that I spent Christmas with my in-laws, my husband's family. My family, we have this very orderly Christmas Eve where we open up one gift at a time and we thank the person and we get to see the delight of the other person, and it's a kind of a more intimate, quiet experience. So we have lots of boundaries around saying thank you and one at a time and etc. So I'm going to my husband's family for the first time. We're just married. They have a completely different idea about what Christmas is. Oh my goodness, gifts are flying, paper is flying, everybody's opening up gifts at the same time, there's a lot of energy, a lot of happiness, and I was like, I don't know if people liked my gift or not, and what did I get? And I was very overwhelmed. People are really different, and we don't always know that. I didn't even think about that until I experienced Christmas with somebody else other than my own family. So, how do I know if my boundaries are healthy or not? And can boundaries change? Yes. You might have a certain kind of boundary with somebody that you have a first date with versus somebody that you've now said, hey, we're committing ourselves to each other, we're in a serious relationship, and actually we're thinking about a lifetime commitment together. You might have very different boundaries around your stuff, what you share, your money, your time, your physical touch. Those boundaries might change a lot as the nature of your relationship changes. And you can also change your mind in the middle of it. Yes? Is there something as unhealthy boundaries? Yes, there would be unhealthy boundaries. We're going to get to that. You can change your mind about boundaries. You can have unhealthy boundaries. You can have healthy boundaries. And of course, how do you make some of these decisions? Well, you get to choose, right? Now, as a psychologist, I might have some thoughts around what's healthy and what's unhealthy. At the same time, you are adults now, and you do get to choose how you want your boundaries to be. And you should not change your boundary because of pressure, or force, or coercion, or manipulation. As soon as that occurs, we know that somebody has crossed your boundary. The most obvious example of that is rape, right? That is crossing a sexual boundary, and it's pressure, force, coercion, or manipulation. Boundaries, when we think about creation, boundaries play a big part in creating a healthy relationship that allows you to be the kind of person that God created you to be. I want you to just think now for a second, where in your life are you experiencing some problems? And again, now this is personal, right? So I don't necessarily want you to be sharing this with anybody. I want you to just keep this private to yourself. the bell in some kind of way. Okay, so what does that mean? If you have a rigid boundary like a brick wall, you will only eat Italian. That is the only pizza. That's it. If you can't have pizza, I'm not going. How fun is that? That's not very fun. It means that your relationship breaks down because the boundary is too rigid. Because that person has really rigid boundaries. It means that they keep people at a distance and detached because it doesn't build relationship. There's no negotiation. There's no flexibility. It's this way, my way, or the highway, and it's rigid. So you avoid deepening relationships. You wouldn't ask others for help. We're looking at going out to eat, but this would be around any of these boundaries that we're talking about. You don't ever share personal information or details. How would you feel if your friend never told you anything that was personal about anything in their life? Or they would only do this one particular activity. But it does keep you very safe because you never have to reveal or engage. It's this kind of person might be quite detached from their romantic partner or from their best friends or relationships, and they might have few close relationships. So if you have very rigid boundaries, that's going to be your experience. On the other hand, you can have porous, chaotic, or unclear boundaries. I put a picture here of a gate because I was in Switzerland in June. And I was walking along, the beautiful mountains and hills of Switzerland. And I'm walking along this path, and there's a gate, but there's no fence this way, and no fence this way. And I looked at this gate, and I thought, this is the most insane thing I have ever seen. Why do we have a gate here? I realized later is that they actually put up and take down the fences because they are letting the cows roam. So there was a purpose to it. But that would be an example of something that's kind of chaotic and unclear or porous. Or how many of you are along a trail, you see a gate, there is a fence, but there's a little space for you to squeeze through. So you don't take the gate seriously and you go through the gate because you can squeeze through. There is in a park near my home, there was a path, and they were renovating the path. And there was, this path that we went over to get to the path. And they decided that they wanted to block that off. But everybody was used to accessing the path from this area. And it didn't matter how many times they tried to block that path, people just kept going around and around and around. They just ignored the boundary because they couldn't get an entire fence to block it off. So it was an unclear boundary, and we just kept working around it. So if you have unclear boundaries, you're going to fear rejection, so you're going to accept whatever people want you to do. This can often end up in abusive relationships. You do a lot of people pleasing. You don't say no. We were talking about yes or no. You don't say no. You're reliant on the opinions of others. You overshare private information. You overly engage with other people's problems and issues. And so when somebody comes to you and says, hey, let's go out to eat, you're like, oh, whatever you want. You're afraid of rejection. You don't want to displease people, so you have no opinions. Now, it's also possible that you truly don't care. That's also an option. But it's also possible that you're just having no opinions so that you don't have to displease anybody. And that might mean that you have really unclear boundaries. How many of you have had the experience where somebody says, do you want to go out to eat? You're like, I'm not sure really what I want to do. And they say, hey, let's do Greek. And as soon as they say Greek, you're like absolutely convinced that's not what you want. And in fact, what you want is Italian. How many of you have had that? There is something about when somebody sets a clear boundary that is actually helpful for you to figure out what your boundary is and what you want. You didn't know you wanted Italian until somebody else said they wanted Greek, and then all of a sudden you have an idea. It can be really helpful to share your boundaries because it can help you get clear about what it is that you want. So healthy boundaries, you can say no. You can say, yeah, I'm not really feeling that at the moment. but you can still be open to the relationship. So you don't compromise unnecessarily. You do compromise, but not unnecessarily. You communicate your values and your needs and your wants, and you respect others when they say no. And you share information but appropriately. You don't overshare information. Here are some great phrases and responses. So now I want you to think about, I asked you to write down whether there was some problems or areas in your life that maybe weren't working, or you're feeling a little overwhelmed or exhausted. And it is potential that there is a boundary there that you need to set. A boundary with your time, a boundary with saying yes or no, how you handle your money, how much you're sharing, what your habits are, secrets. I don't know, there's probably some boundary. And so here are some great phrases. This is not an exhaustive list, but it might be that you just simply need to say no. And you can say no, which sounds like a rigid boundary, or you can say no thank you, which sounds clear and but also flexible. If somebody tells you something that you don't want to hear and you're not really sure how to respond, sometimes it's helpful to just say, I need some time to process this. And that allows you some time to think about what it is that you need to say. Think about whether any of these phrases are relevant to the situation that you wrote down. Or you could just say, no, I'm not really comfortable with that. You might have to be a lot more clear. Somebody keeps talking about something that you find too personal and you don't want to talk about. You might say, please not bring that up again. That's making me uncomfortable. Or you might just say, that's not going to work for me. Or I'm sorry, I'm not available. We often think that we have to give a reason. Sometimes the most powerful is not to give a reason. You know, the telemarketer who says, you know, I'd like to sell you this, and as soon as you say, well, I don't have enough money, then they now know that it's about money and they're going to convince you that it's really cheap and it's really a good deal. Sometimes it's really helpful to just say, I'm sorry, I'm not available. You don't have to lie. You don't have to make something up. You just have to say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not available. Or let me get back to you on that if you're not sure. If you're making a point and you're not sure that the other person has understood you, to come back to it and say, just to be clear, this is what I meant. I don't have the time or energy to do that right now. If somebody says something to you that's really not appropriate, and if you were to just say, hey, that's not appropriate, right, you might put a dent in the relationship. So you might say, oh, that's kind of an interesting question, or that's an odd question, and it kind of might just kind of give them that subtle message that you're not really wanting to answer it. Or you might say, oh, they said something that was not really kind. Well, that's an interesting thing to say out loud. Somebody was asking me the other day, somebody had said something to them that was like, whoa, and the response to it was like, excuse me? Like, did you understand what you just said? I prefer to keep that quiet. I'm not comfortable with that level of investment you're suggesting. I can't commit to that right now, but I'll let you know if anything changes. You'll notice that some of these sound a little bit softer and some of them sound harsher. It's always great to be as soft as you are able to be while still being clear. Because what you're trying to do is protect the relationship. So you don't want to be too harsh in the things that you say. Sometimes you just don't have to say anything. Or you disagree with somebody. Instead of saying, I disagree with you, right? That's terrible, which might create an argument or a fight. You might just say, that's not really been my experience. Or you might have to be more clear. I would like it when you agree to disagree at this point in time. My kids the other day were having a huge discussion about politics. As you know, that there's been elections, an election in British Columbia, there was an election in the United States, there was a big discussion. And it would have been great if they had just said, I think we can agree to disagree. My feelings are equally as important as yours, so I respect your feelings, but I have a different feeling. You've given me a lot to know, or we can discuss this at a later date. So you can just think about what you wrote down. Do any of these phrases or something similar help you in figuring out if there's a boundary that you life, and it's a learning process. You're not going to get it right. Just like I say, your first year in university is the year that your GPA is ruined, right? It will get better. Your first year is really difficult. So that's why we're doing University 101, trying to give you the best start, because while you're trying to learn the balance of university, it can be challenging. So when we think about where we started off with creation, God had everything perfectly balanced. Everything was in harmony. It was perfect and it was great. Not too much of this, not too little of this. The boundary was not too rigid. It was not too porous or chaotic. Everything was ordered and structured. And it was in this perfect balance and harmony. Have any of you ever tried to stack up rocks like that?
Yes.
Yeah, it's quite a game to see how many high you can get. So we come back to, again, our slide where what was being created. Order, structure, connectedness, beauty, meaning, purpose. You might want to think about right now, how are you doing? Is the order in your structure in your life working? Do you have the right balance of study time and where you study and how you manage your time? Are you getting that balance correct? If you don't, you probably need to think about some boundaries that you need to set. Are you getting connectedness in relationships? There is nothing better than university to establish friendships and relationships and meet people and experience that. It's a really wonderful time. And are you getting that right balance with getting to know people? And remember, relationships is probably one of the biggest things in how long we're going to live. Really, really important. And beauty, are you taking time to smell the roses? Right? Are you taking that time to enjoy what's beautiful, or to be creative, or to soak all that stuff in? And what is your meaning and purpose? You're here because you are uniquely you, and for the first time you're actually really getting to choose, where do I want to focus? What do I want to study? What do I want to do with my life? So as you think about balance, what needs priority in your life? How do you structure your physical world? Appreciate your successes. That's part of smelling the roses. In fact, if you're a perfectionist, you know what perfectionists do? They demand high standards of themselves, but when they get a success, oh, that was yesterday. No, when you work hard and you get a success, appreciate it, savor it, and it will help you get the courage to continue. Are you doing what you're meant to do? You're here to figure that out. Are you in the right major? Should you choose a major? What's your personality? Are you doing and being the person that you were meant to be? And who are you connecting with? So that is the perfection of creation and how God created us to be, with all of those aspects, making sure that the boundaries and everything is in perfect balance and harmony. And so my challenge for you today is set the intention. You may not get a perfect balance, but set the intention. How am I going to set those boundaries? How am I going to create balance in my life? Pick some area, something that you've heard from today, and think about what you personally need to work with. And that's really what, January is setting your New Year's resolutions. I know that I did that for myself, and I set about 5 goals every year, and I would say something creative, and something in psychology, and something in health, and something in finance and business, and I would set intention. I didn't always meet my goals, but if you don't set your intention, it's going to be chaotic, it's going to be too porous, it's going to be too rigid, and you're not going to get where you want to go. So that's my thoughts for today. I'm happy to have met you all in this class, and I hope to see you again. I probably won't recognize all of your faces, but I'm happy to say hello and see you on campus. Love to have a psychology class with you.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. You know what your homework is? What's your homework?
What?
Set an intention. Set your intention. Okay? So,